Welcome to the show. Thanks very much for joining us. Can you start by just introducing yourself?
Yeah, so Christel Wolthoorn, well done for pronunciation. I'm Danish-Dutch, but been in the UK for the last 20 odd years, and I'm currently the CEO of Sander Talent.
Thank you. So let's start from the beginning. How did you get there? You started out in a kind of Marcoms role.
Yeah.
How did you get started?
I mean, I have a quite, I would say, patchwork career that kind of probably makes sense when you look back, but I suppose sometimes you kind of still, how did I end up here? So very, very right. I came to the UK and did various things and ultimately got to a point where my lovely dad said, are you going to start studying? Are you going to come back to Denmark? And I thought I'd better do that. So I sort of looked around and was like, okay, international business marketing, that's the way to go. And I did that for a little while because I was interested in businesses. I was interested in how organizations grow and how they work. My husband had just started a business at this time, and he would come home with all these crazy questions, and I thought someone needs to study this. So it was a bit of a serendipitous thing that I landed in marketing, but quite quickly realized that what I liked about marketing was actually the people side. It was the change side. It was sort of understanding problems. So I went back to uni and got my master's at LSE in sort of more of an organizational change and comms role. And that was in 2009, and we graduated, and there was a lovely recession, no jobs. It was absolutely this impossible.
Tough time to graduate and move into
very
business.
tough time. And I remember we were all like, being told that we graduated from a great university, but actually it didn't matter because there was no roles. So I needed to find something to do, and I applied for a job in PR and a graduate scheme. And while I was there, I was adamant that I actually wanted to get into communications. So I guess I pestered the guy who ran the internal comms and change team to take me on, and he was very adamant that I was not going to work in his comms team because there was no roles. But one day he came to my desk and said, all right, come with me. And he took me into an office and said, there's an opportunity to go and work for Deloitte. And that was a complete career changer for me. I was straight out of university. I was still new in my career, and I went over to Deloitte, and I got the opportunity to work for David Sproul, who was at that time just going to be the new CEO. He had 6 months to kind of transition into this role, and he needed someone to support him. And I just joined an organization who were so big on helping people grow and supporting people and giving people opportunities. And from there, I quickly became head of internal communications and just got an opportunity to really just stretch my skills. And then from there, it's sort of been different circumstances really. Had my first child, came back from maternity leave and felt that it was very difficult to sort of come back to the old me. Suddenly I was no longer this free-spirited person who could do what she wanted. I had to be home at a certain time and look after my little one and that. So I got an opportunity to go and join KPMG to set up a digital team. And similar to how it was at that time, I was like, it felt like it was something new, it was something I really wanted to do. It was sort of very gut feel, really. This seems to be something that could be interesting. So I joined the KPMG team, again, an organization where I got a really great opportunity to play. Did that for a couple of years, had my second child, went on maternity leave, and was asked to join software business called EPAM. So again, very much like just following the trends that I saw in the market, and joined them for a while. And then I was asked to go and join a little startup called Love By, a business design consultancy. And I ended up leading that for a couple of years. And then Sander came knocking. And I was like, you know what, this feels like it's bringing together my background of people, consultancy, purpose, and again, running a business that's pretty unique.
It's funny how that happens, isn't it? I think, if I look back at your path, the way you've described, I think the right balance of being in the right place at the right time and chasing opportunities as they pop up. But also, I think the way you described, so my wife and I have a baby on the way. We are.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We're about a month away from the due date. So as someone described in a call last week, we're well in the blast zone. You said you moved to KPMG after having a baby. Is that just because of big company, more flexibility around having children, or was that an explicit decision that you made for your life?
It was more that I actually struggled very much with my identity coming back. And I think it's a big part of my career as well, around I've always been a big advocate for, diversity and change. For me, coming back, there was less focus on women and, having babies and it wasn't that long ago. So ironically, it feels like a lifetime ago. My daughter is turning 12 this year, so it's 12 years ago. And I really struggled coming back with my identity. It was just very hard for me to figure out who I was in this new role, and I almost felt like I needed to kind of start somewhere else. So it was actually more that led by that, and of course an opportunity. It was a great opportunity and exciting, but with hindsight, I mean, I had a fantastic opportunity in my first role, and had I not had my daughter, I'll probably be there today. That's probably the case.
Yeah. They're all people roles ultimately. I think I've worked in software my entire life, and I think there's a tendency to go down the path of thinking, I work with machines, I manage them, the machines by writing the code, and therefore, the machine is my life. And I think as you grow a little, and certainly for me, it was a maturity thing. I had to grow up, and you realize actually all jobs are people jobs.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah. So tell us about Windsor and how you got handpicked for a leadership position in this leadership role at Windsor.
I've been very fortunate to do a lot of really great leadership development during my career, but always quite quirky stuff. And actually the opportunity with them was through a contact I met at another leadership program. But I didn't do much with them. And the reason why was that the timing actually was really bad. Again, it was just around the time where I had returned back to my new role, and I just had my baby, number 2, and it was just overwhelming. So that was an example of an opportunity, I think, that slipped through a little bit. I was given a chance, and I actually wasn't able to fully capitalize on that opportunity, sadly.
Yeah. Real life gets in the way, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It really does.
Yeah. I hate it when people say, you get the diversity bug, right? But I think over time, it's something that hits a lot of us, that actually the traditional ways of doing things, the traditional paths, aren't always or often the right thing. And that as a society, and particularly my world in software, we kind of found these ruts or found these grooves of hiring from the right universities, hiring the right kind of people. And we kind of made a flywheel for a very white, very male, very, neurotypical kind of world.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of us have recognized that it takes a lot of energy and work and passion and drive and money and time, all of those things to change the world. How do you feel about that? How did you end up at Xandar?
So I agree with all that, and I think there's a couple of entry points there. The first one for me was that when I was at this position where my dad said, you need to get a degree. I come from a country where getting a degree means you pick a university. It doesn't matter which one, you just pick a university, you do it, and when you finish, everybody goes, well done, you graduated, that's wonderful. So I had this idea that you just pick the university, and actually then everybody said, well done, and you went to get a job. And what I realized when I picked my first university was that it mattered what kind of university you went to, which was quite new to me and maybe incredibly naive, but coming from abroad, I didn't know the rules of engagement in this country. And the reality was that I had always been a very diligent student. I always had, I've always done well and I loved to study. So I could probably have picked most universities, but I didn't. And what I realized when I graduated was that there was no doors open to me. The kind of milk round and the recruitment fairs were not very impressive, and it was actually really difficult to get a job if you didn't have this kind of the right label. Hence why when I then went back to LSE and did my master's, suddenly, we were told the doors were open and then recession happened, but it's definitely changed my trajectory. And that was a very privileged position to be in, because I, again, come from a country where Denmark paid my master's, right? So for me, that was very interesting. I always thought, how can this be that I become a different person depending on the label that's put upon me, when actually I'm just me? I studied, I read the curriculum, I understand the context. I then obviously joined very consultancies, both to your point, sort of more the professional services and also engineering. It was an engineering space. And of course, I was the sort of outlier. I was always this person who didn't really fit in. I was in digital when KPMG didn't do digital, I was in business consulting in the technology business. So being a woman and caring about diversity was, of course, always very important to me. So I think all these things sort of come together really when you then start to say, okay, how do we actually make sure that we support people? And I think the final thing for me was that I also know throughout my career that actually what really lifts you up is people who believe in you and people who actually give you the opportunities. And when I look at the business we're in and I look at the people that come through our doors, ultimately, they're amazing and have loads of potential. But a lot of the time what you need is someone to actually just trust you, have your back, and push you forward. And I think that that's a very, very privileged position to be in, to be able to help support people in their careers.
Yeah, 100%. I think that there's a difference between organizations that have now come to accept diversity and the benefits of diversity of background and experience and thought. There's a difference between those and the organizations who are driving diversity. And if I look on Xander's, your homepage in black and white, it says diverse talent.
Yeah.
I think there's a kind of boldness there. There's a kind of fearlessness that says this is what we care about, that has only really come to pass in the last, say, 5 years or so, sort of like ESG businesses, the DEI-focused businesses. How do you take that step?
Our founders of the business have designed the business with that in mind. So from the outset, diversity was the fabric for the business. So it's never really for us been a matter of like, should we be more intentional about diversity? I also think that for us as an organization, considering the type of the roles, the opportunity we give people, we naturally attract diversity. This is the thing I think is so ironic for us. It's such a natural thing because we have got, for example, no degree expectations. So there's a lot of barriers to entry that's lower, which by definition just means that you naturally get more people because people come from different perspectives. So for me, that's the thing. I think it's also, we talk a lot about diversity. I think diversity is a given today. But where the real challenge, of course, is just like inclusion and, of course, equity. And I still think that for every organization, that is the hardest part. It's easier to hire diverse and think about that, but it's harder to think about how people feel included and part of a team or part of an organization. It's not enough to just hire. And I think that's where a lot of organizations still falling behind and lacking that intention.
Yeah. It almost feels as though, like, collectively, we looked hard at the first hurdle and how to solve the problem of hiring. And some organizations I know said as much as, we must hire 50% of, there were figures, there were numbers. And that's a very, very like engineering mindset way to look at the problem. But I think, to take a big hammer to a small rock, it's solved one problem, but then we haven't spent nearly enough time talking about how we focus on sponsoring people for promotion, how we talk about leadership, how we talk about engagement in those areas. And I think that, that there's a huge problem that we've seen in larger organizations where all of the female engineers end up on every panel, going to every conference, on every web page.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, isn't it? You get to a point where you become fed up being the token diversity hire, right? Because it's the same group. So yeah, I completely agree with that.
Yeah, we've swapped one problem for another. We've got a few minutes. I'd love to hear your thoughts about the state of the talent market right now. I think that we all know that last year was a tough year. Hopefully there's quote unquote green shoots of engagement in this kind of business in the next year. Where does Xander stand and where do you stand?
The talent market has been really tough. Last year was really tough for a number of reasons. I think that the challenge with doing things like we're doing is that when the market is tough, the type of focus that should be more than ever important shift, right? So when you're under cost pressure or time pressure or delivery pressure, you care less about the things that should matter the most. So what we've really seen, and I think is my big concern, is we've really seen, I think, a shift away from focus. Where we talked to clients 4 years ago about diversity, it was like really exciting, where today they're like, yeah, but how much are they going to cost and why should we not hire them out of X, Y, and Z, and how, it's a very different conversation. That really concerns me because I think that we forget very quickly what matters. And there's a lot of other examples, ESG and other things that falls to the pressure of the market, right? So there's a real need to rethink the systems that we operate in. And there is a real, I think, need to think about the players who are really consistently pushing for change, because it is really, really hard to push for change when you keep having barriers in front of you. And that's not considered, right? It's almost like, oh, you care about talent. Well, keep chipping away at it over there. I agree that we're definitely seeing that things feels more positive. I think people have to change, but I think also the whole AI hysteria that we've seen in the last year have not made things easier, because ultimately we don't know what this means. We don't know what we need. We don't know what we can hire, and I think there's still a lot of that needs to be considered. So I think for me, when we think about the importance of diversity, we think importance about hiring broader. I think we should start thinking about, well, what are the implications of the type of systems and technologies we are building? How do we ensure that people from non-technical backgrounds has a part in this play? How do we ensure that it's not just the future that's been built by a very distinct, maybe on paper diverse group of people, but still a group of technologists or a group of...
Yeah.
I'm really concerned about that. So I feel like we need to think about diversity in a broader sense, not just in terms of have we got the right balance of gender, ethnicity, etc. in a group of people, but actually have we got the diversity of thought that we always say that's why diversity is important. I think more than ever, diversity of thought, of challenge, of curiosity, of compassion and passion in any product, in any decision we make going forward is absolutely critical. So I feel that the case for what we do is stronger than ever. I feel more passionate than ever that what we're doing is the right thing. But I am also, of course, conscious that at the end of the day, I need clients and businesses to be brave enough to take this journey with us, right? And I think that's why I'm hoping to see that unlocking a little bit in the coming months, and hopefully at least in the coming year, if we have to have a bit more patience so that we can continue to really do what's important, not just for us as a business, but also ultimately for us as a society, right?
Yeah, we all do, absolutely. Where can we find you online? Where are you active?
Obviously, we got our website, sandertalent.com. Please come and check us out. We are on LinkedIn, and Christel Wolthoorn on LinkedIn as well. I try to comment on things that's going on at the moment. And like I said, I'm really curious, fascinated, and skeptical about where the world is heading. So hopefully I'll be sharing more, and I'm always keen for hearing people's perspective and challenge back so that we can have a good conversation.
Wonderful. We look forward to hearing from Xander Talent and Christel Wolthoorn. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Sam. Really appreciate it.